for the vacationer and the business traveler on CNN Travel Guide with Bella Shaw.
Hello, or maybe we should say, good day. Travel Guide continues its adventures down under this week with a visit to Australia's premier city and tips for souvenir hunters. Then, a little closer to home, we'll make a springtime pilgrimage to the Old South. All that and more when we return.
The United States Treasury has been kind enough to print zillions of these handy reminders to help you remember the name of the rent-a-car company that offers everyday low rates and unlimited mileage on every car they rent. And that includes Cadillacs. Discover the value of a dollar rent-a-car at all major airports and hundreds of locations nationwide.
Is this any way to spend a weekend? Get away to Marriott's 2 for Breakfast weekend, where you can be alone, together. Lounge by the pool in sweet oblivion, dance the night away. Through March 26, just $49 to $69 per night, not per person, depending on location. A hearty breakfast for 2 is included. Marriott's 2 for Breakfast weekend, from $49 to $69. Call 1-800-USA-WKND.
From the series that inspired the smash hit, Robert Stack as Elliot Ness, The Untouchables. 7 Eastern on Superstation TBS tonight.
It's been said that a visit to Australia is like seeing America as it used to be. Australia isn't exactly a frontier society anymore. In fact, it's the most highly urbanized society in the world. Still, even in the cities, the living is easy. Nowhere is that more apparent than in magnificent Sydney.
This is where it all started. Sydney was the first established settlement in Australia, and 200 years later, it remains the country's #1 city. Sydney is a study in contrasts, where man-made structures sit side by side with wonders of nature. The city's showpiece is its harbor. It serves as a tourist attraction, a playground, and a home to the city's most famous landmarks. The glistening white sails of the Opera House sit in splendor on Bennelong Point, overlooking the harbor. The Opera House is actually a complex for all of the performing arts. Tourists can take in a performance or look at the building on a $3 guided tour. Within view of the Opera House is that other Sydney landmark, the Harbor Bridge. Locals lovingly refer to this 56-year-old structure as the old coat hanger. A boat's eye view of the harbor is a must for any tourist. The weekends are the best time to set sail, as the harbor becomes a kaleidoscope of color, filled with yachts, boats, or anything else that floats. Water lovers might also head to one of 30 or so beaches that surround Sydney. Bondi is the most famous of these. Every day, a bizarre orchestra of players populates this playground. The world-famous lifesavers in their color-coded beanies are here. So are the surfers, runners, and topless bathing beauties. The Taronga Park Zoo is another good place to glimpse life au natural. The zoo has koalas, kangaroos, and other unique Australians, as well as some imports. A stroll or a carriage ride through the rocks makes an ideal history lesson. Australia's rich and romantic history is preserved in this colorful district. This is where Sydney was born, where the original convict settlers made their home. Unsavory characters ruled the area until recently, but now the Rocks is a trendy area. Its cobblestone streets lined with shops and restaurants. Whether sports, sightseeing, or shopping is your bag, there's no doubt about it. In Sydney, the world can be your oyster.
Half the fun of a visit to any exotic location is picking up gifts for the folks back home. There aren't a lot of bargains in Australia, but there are plenty of unique items for sale.
With every Australian dollar worth about 75 cents U.S., prices are quite reasonable. The larger department stores around the country, like David Jones and Myers, are the best bet for the latest Australian fashions. Sydney is a regular treasure trove for shoppers. Souvenir hunters will find a bounty in the Rocks district. It's filled with fun shops offering uniquely Australian goods. Bennelong Boomerangs is a new store that seems to have customers coming back for more. Picture postcards on carpet are featured as designer rugs. Don't worry about lugging one of these home with you. Shipping is included in the price. Looking for the real Australia? Check out Aboriginal craft stores featuring homemade art. Wall paintings, small figurines, and pottery are easy-to-pack souvenirs. One real bargain for American shoppers in Australia is the opal. They cost less here because Australia produces the bulk of the world's opals. And, an added bonus, opals are duty-free. Remember that store hours are limited. In most cities, stores are open from 9 to 5 weekdays with one night of evening shopping. But don't save shopping for the weekend. In most of the country, stores close at noon Saturday and don't reopen until Monday. In Sydney, most stores stay open till about 4 on Saturday, but are closed on Sunday.
Before heading to Australia, visitors should head to a bookstore to pick up some background reading. For historians or anyone else interested in the settlement of Australia, The Fatal Shore is one of the most comprehensive volumes around. Robert Hughes has detailed the country's history from the arrival of the First Fleet up to the 1800s. The book is long and sometimes a bit dry, but after reading it, places like Botany Bay and Port Arthur will come to life. Another good but challenging read is Anthony Trollope's Australia. This British author viewed Australia from a 19th century perspective. His 2 volumes provide a detailed historical background, ideal for the traveler dedicated to learning about the destination. Next week, we take a closer look at Australia's wildlife, and we'll look at some of the bicentennial events taking place around Australia.
America, you look like you need a holiday, a fair dinkum holiday. In the land of wonder, the land down under. Now, there's a few things I got to warn you about. Firstly, you're going to get wet because the place is surrounded by water. Oh, and you're going to have to learn to say good day. Because every day's a good day in Australia.
G'day, Paul.
G'day, love. Of course, you'll have to get used to some of the local customs, like getting a suntan at the restaurant, playing football without a helmet, and calling everyone mate. Thanks, mate.
Cheers, right, mate.
Apart from that, no worries. You'll have the time of your life in Australia. Of course, we talk the same language. Although you lot do have a funny accent. Oh, before you rush out to book your Aussie holiday, call this toll-free number for your free Aussie holiday book. Come on. Come and say good day. I'll slip an extra shrimp on the barbie for you.
Why stuff yourself into someone else's idea of a bargain when Dollar Rent-A-Car can put you in the lap of Cadillac luxury for just $36.95 a day? And that includes unlimited mileage. Discover the value of Dollar's Cadillacs at all major airports and hundreds of locations nationwide.
While you may think that a motorhome is only a condominium on wheels, Phasar owners believe that their motorhome is a front-wheel drive car and a roomy custom van and a luxury wagon. It's gotten to the point where Phasar owners believe that their motorhome can be almost anything.
The first word on the overseas markets.
The final word before Wall Street opens.
Watch Business Morning
and Business Day, beginning 6:30 a.m. Eastern on CNN.
Many places claim to offer a trip back in time, but Natchez, Mississippi does exactly that and more. Visitors can see some of the most beautiful antebellum homes of the Old South and get a good dose of history besides. And when they've had enough walking and driving, there's always a float down a lazy river. This is Natchez, Mississippi, on the east bank of the Mississippi River. It's about a 3 or 4 hour drive northwest of New Orleans, or a bit longer if you come by riverboat. This part of Natchez is called Monmouth. It's just one of more than 300 examples of antebellum architecture still standing here. Built in 1818, it's as proud and magnificent as ever. Antebellum means before the war. That was a time when Natchez was a very wealthy place. Cotton was king, and what better to do than to spend fortunes on enormous mansions, monuments to the success and imagination of their owners. Many of the antebellum mansions survived because, for the most part, the war went around Natchez. That was not the case at Vicksburg, just up the river. This was the site of a bloody but crucial victory for the North. It was a turning point in the war that brought the antebellum period to an end. Here in antebellum Natchez, you'll enjoy a visit more if you have a taste for historical footnotes. This, for example, is the Briars, a beautiful example of Southern planter design. Jefferson Davis, who eventually became president of the Confederacy, was married here in 1845. This is logwood, the largest octagonal house remaining in America. When the war broke out, the Yankee construction workers took off. In the unfinished interior of the dome, their tools and scaffolding remain where they left them almost 130 years ago. Like Charleston, South Carolina, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Natchez is another place where the Old South seems very much alive. To help plan a visit here, the Natchez Convention and Visitors Commission will send brochures and other information. From outside Mississippi, call 1-800-647-6724. The mayor's house is a favorite in Natchez. Built in 1832, it served as a headquarters and hospital for occupying Union troops during the war. Mayor Tony Byrne and his wife, Levita, not only live here, but also use part of their home as a bed and breakfast inn. In Natchez, tourism is a growing industry, and being a good host is just part of being a good citizen. If you come to Natchez and you're looking for a place to stay, why not try this little place or this little place? These are just a few of the antebellum mansions of the South. Some have been converted to bed and breakfasts. It's hard to beat the accommodations and the price. About $75 for a room like this. For that price, you also get breakfast. Here at Monmouth, folks eat in an outbuilding that dates back to the early 1800s.
This is called a pagoda. It's a courting sofa, when your boy and girl and chaperone all sit back to back. Real romantic.
A tour of the house gives visitors a chance to learn some of the history of the mansion. Dinner is also served in some of these places. Here at Magnolia Hall, we caught the Natchez Garden Club enjoying a candlelight dinner. The money raised at this affair was used for further restoration of the building. For people who want to escape when they travel, the Old South may be exactly what they need. They'll be away from home and the pressures and atmosphere of the 1980s, for a little while at least. The appeal of a trip into the past depends a lot on the person. Some people might visit and just see a lot of fancy old furniture. But for those interested in the Old South and all the history that goes with it, Natchez is a great idea. It's a bit out of the way, 3 or 4 hours by car from New Orleans. It's worth the effort to get here, though. Natchez may be a small town, but it has a lot of big stories to tell. It's a history lesson made easy. There probably is no more beautiful time to visit Natchez than in the spring. From now until April 9th, 30 of the city's most beautiful antebellum homes will be open for tourists during the Natchez Spring Pilgrimage. 4 nights a week, visitors can also catch performances of another equally famous event, the Confederate Pageant. Vicksburg, Columbus, and Holly Springs also have similar tours of homes. For more information, write or call the Mississippi Division of Tourism, Post Office Box 22825, Jackson, Mississippi 39205. Coming up, news from the world of travel and a last look at the ski season. Stay with us.
Is this any way to spend a weekend? Get away to Marriott's 2 for Breakfast weekend, where you can be alone, together. Lounge by the pool in sweet oblivion, dance the night away. Through March 26, just $49 to $69 per night, not per person, depending on location. A hearty breakfast for 2 is included. Marriott's 2 for Breakfast weekend, from $49 to $69. Call 1-800-USA-WKND.
The world's first global newscast. Don't miss the world as other countries see it. World Report first run tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
In our travel update file this week, some cruise passengers can expect to pay a little more to get back home. And the U.S. thinks about visa-free travel.
A test program that would drop visa requirements for Americans visiting certain other countries should be underway within the next year or so. In exchange, the State Department program would allow travelers from selected countries to enter the United States without visas. Japan and the United Kingdom should be the first countries to test the 3-year program. 6 other countries are expected to participate at a later date. The program is meant to encourage travel in the United States, but the Immigration Service must set up automated systems to track arrivals and departures at major gateways before the plan can get underway. On another note, the INS wants more international travelers to pay its $5 inspection fee. Travelers first began paying the ticket surcharge in December of 1986. The INS now says passengers on cruises that leave the U.S. and then call at a port outside North America before returning to the United States must pay up. The change is expected to affect passengers on Caribbean cruises the most. Finally, one of the world's most famous tourist attractions has some monumental problems. More than a century and a half after Napoleon built it to commemorate his victories, the Arc de Triomphe is crumbling. France has embarked on a national campaign to restore the Arc, and in a turnabout of sorts is accepting donations from Americans to help pay the $6 million cost.
Bird watchers might want to wing it to San Juan Capistrano next week. March 19th is the day the swallows make their annual pilgrimage to this mission city. Ski season is winding down around the country. We'd like to say goodbye with a look at an unusual sort of skiing in Winter Park, Colorado. Ski joring takes a little bit of horsemanship, a little bit of skill, and a lot of daring do.
It's a rough combination of equestrian skill and alpine skiing, and it's called ski joring. Ski joring is the main event of Winter Wild West Week at Winter Park Resort. Actually, ski joring isn't Western at all. It has its roots in Scandinavia, but ski joring is building a following. In Colorado, half a dozen competitions are held each year.
They get in this and try it a few times, and it's fast, flat-out speed from standstill to go, and the competitiveness between each other, because it's a tough competitive sport. It's done down in hundreds of seconds usually, and anytime you get that and a little thrill of danger in there like these jumps are, skiers like it.
This one-of-a-kind contest includes jumps, a few hairpin turns, and a ring grab. All this behind a horse going up to 30 miles an hour.
Well, I started doing it about 11 years ago. A guy talked me into doing it just for fun, and I just come to every one of them. Just show up. And the money.
Fennel and Avery, he's off the jump, he's clean. I know we're pro at this, but he's off the first jump and heads to those rings.
The skier with the fastest time wins each race and splits the prize money with the horse owner.
And that's our show for this week. Please join us next week when we visit Barbados in the sunny Caribbean. And please, keep those cards and letters coming.
This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
People have taken to the streets in cities across the nation to protest the deployment of U.S. troops in Honduras. Police have arrested hundreds of them. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, welcome to Newsday. I'm Bella Shaw. Pentagon sources say Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North has requested permission to retire from the Marine Corps. North was indicted Wednesday for his role in the Iran-Contra scandal. The sources say North asked to take the retirement May 1st when he will have the required 20 years of service. North is on leave from his current job in the Marine Corps Plans Division now. Oliver North has scheduled a news conference for 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time in Washington, and CNN is making efforts to bring that to you live. All 3,200 U.S. troops participating in Operation Golden Pheasant have now arrived in Honduras. Some dropped in today by parachute to begin the joint military exercises with Honduran troops. CNN has learned that U.S. troops will be moving closer to the combat zone around the Nicaraguan-Honduran border than originally believed. The Pentagon says some troops could come as close as 60 miles to the combat zone rather than the 125 miles reported yesterday by the U.S. But military officials emphasize the troops will not play a combat role. And in an interview this afternoon on CNN, Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams discussed the U.S. troop deployment.
I saw some inaccurate reporting yesterday, and maybe even some inaccurate statements that all of the U.S. troops would stay exactly at Palmarola Air Base where they land. They're not. They're fanning out in order to make this a sensible and useful deployment exercise. Some, for example, I gather, are going up to the north or Caribbean coast of Honduras jointly in an exercise jointly with Hondurans.
Honduran jets and Nicaraguan ground forces exchanged fire yesterday along their troubled border. The fighting sent both journalists and Sandinista soldiers scrambling for cover. Western diplomats in Honduras say the raid forced a partial Nicaraguan retreat from Honduras. The Nicaraguan exile community in Miami is divided on the U.S. airlift of troops into Honduras. CNN's Al Sunshine has a report.
Many of Miami's Nicaraguan exiles strongly support the Reagan administration's deployment of U.S. combat troops into Honduras. Contra supporters here believe it shows the president's commitment not to abandon the Nicaraguan rebels, despite last month's congressional refusal to provide new aid to the Contras.
I think the administration has sent a clear message to the Sandinistas that this administration is not going to fool around with them. And if the Sandinistas continue to invade Honduras, this administration will take steps to make sure that they don't.
But some Contra supporters in South Florida remain frustrated. The U.S. now has to send in combat troops as a show of strength in Honduras, rather than allowing the Nicaraguan rebels to have continued military and other supplies to protect themselves.
It's a political game. I think it would be worse not to do anything, but it's not really going to solve the situation. The solution is to let the Nicaraguan people solve their problems by giving aid to the Nicaraguans. The Democrats say, let them solve their own problems and stay out of the region.
Nicaraguan exiles in Los Angeles joined several hundred other opponents of the Reagan administration's Central American policy to protest the airlift of U.S. military personnel into Honduras. Some Nicaraguan exiles see the deployment of troops more as a show of support to the Contras rather than support to the Honduran government. And they fear it could hurt the chances of a negotiated settlement between the rebels and the Sandinistas.
Well, as a Nicaraguan person, I feel like this is a real threat, to the Nicaraguan peace. As you know, Nicaragua is struggling for peace, and the people there, they want to live in peace.
Nicaraguan exiles on both coasts share the hope for an end to the fighting that split their homeland. But neither exile communities remain optimistic the presence of U.S. military personnel will do anything to help bring peace to the region. Al Sunshine, CNN, Miami.
U.S. officials say Panamanian police detained 4 American soldiers for several hours yesterday while they were on official duty.
4 U.S. military policemen in civilian clothes were arrested by the Panamanian Defense Force late yesterday on weapons charges. They were released after approximately 5 hours.
The Pentagon said the soldiers are military police carrying standard-issued personal weapons as allowed in agreement with Panama. The Pentagon said these men were assigned to check on government-leased family housing and were doing just that because of a powder outage when they were arrested. 2 more victims of violence in Northern Ireland were buried today in Belfast, both IRA supporters. One of those buried was killed by Protestant extremists, says he attended the funerals Wednesday for 3 IRA members shot dead by British security forces. The other victim of sectarian violence, buried today, was killed Tuesday on his way to work. Today's funerals passed quietly after a night of violence in Belfast, in which demonstrators blocked streets and set cars on fire. President Reagan is being told that private industry should run many services now run by the government. The Presidential Commission on Privatization lists 78 programs or services it thinks could be made more efficient by creative people in the private sector. Included are mail delivery with private companies allowed to compete for the business, an expanded voucher system for low-cost public housing, and sell existing public housing where possible, private operation of airport control towers, but continued government regulations, and sell Amtrak, make rail stations into variety stores, and sell the space above stations for office towers.
We, in effect, today, in social service,
are trying to function as a nation with one arm tied behind our backs. For this reason, you have great talent there that's built the greatest industrial complex ever known to man to this day. And yet they're not allowed to have any input into how you get your mail delivered or how you provide for low-income housing or how your educational system works. If they want to have input, they have to get a job with the government.
Many of these suggestions have been rejected by a Congress that has shown little enthusiasm for privatization so far, and none of the recommendations is likely to be enacted before President Reagan leaves office. Detroit Mayor Coleman Young will not be wearing any Jesse Jackson buttons when Michigan Democrats vote in the state primaries a week from tomorrow. Young is one of several powerful black politicians in the country who has turned away from Jackson.
Now, back to Newsday on CNN.
Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware is said to be doing well today following another round of surgery. Doctors at a Washington hospital inserted a tiny filter into a vein in Biden's abdomen yesterday. The filter is designed to prevent dislodged blood clots from traveling to vital organs. He was hospitalized for a blood clot in his lung this week. This is the second operation Biden has had since he underwent surgery last month for an aneurysm at the base of his brain. Biden will be in the hospital a few more days before heading home to Wilmington. Not bad at all, Flip. It's California's updated version of the tortoise and the hare. The contest was over what animal should be dubbed official state mollusk. The banana slug beat out the abalone. The battle was fought on the floor of the California Assembly, with slug backers eking out a slim 37-36 victory. The Redwood City Bluebird Troop promoted the slug, which doesn't cost $38 a pound like the abalone.
Wouldn't want to eat it like the abalone either.
Well, coming up on Newsday, Jim Huber will have the latest on the NCAA tournament games. Here is the latest on some of our top stories. A bipartisan group of senators is proposing a new $48 million aid package for the Contras in Nicaragua. Most of the plan consists of humanitarian aid, but it also would allow the CIA to deliver previously stockpiled weapons to the Contras. Honduran jets bombed Sandinista positions along the Nicaraguan border in a series of raids. The attacks yesterday came within hours of the arrival of U.S. troops in a show of force against the Sandinistas. And across the United States, police arrested hundreds of people protesting the deployment of U.S. troops in Honduras. The demonstrators blocked entrances to federal buildings in Chicago, Boston, and San Francisco. In Washington, at least 24 protesters were arrested near the White House. And 4 American military police officers were arrested, then released in Panama yesterday. The Pentagon says the 4 were on official duty in Panama City at the time, dressed in civilian clothes, but carrying weapons. State Department officials say the U.S. goal now is to help Panama get out from under Manuel Noriega, even if that means foregoing prosecution of the military strongman on drug charges. In an interview today on CNN, Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams said the U.S. is not interested in vengeance.
The crisis there has to have a Panamanian solution, which means that there has to be an agreement among all the political forces in Panama, the democratic political forces. They have come out and said they would be supporting a coalition government. This was about a week or so ago, under President Del Valle. Part of this has got to be Noriega's departure. And if, in his talks with the opposition, he comes to recognize that his departure is really part of the solution to the problem, that's a good thing. We hope that happens.
Abrams also hinted that the U.S. would not seek to extradite Noriega if he accepts an invitation to exile from Spain. This is the first suggestion by any high-level official that the United States might be willing to compromise to end the Panamanian crisis. As we have told you earlier, sources at the Pentagon say Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North has requested permission to retire from the Marine Corps, and Oliver North had scheduled a news conference in Washington to begin at about 4:30 Eastern Time. There's been a delay in that, and we are still planning to bring it to you live. But right now, let's check in with Myron Kandel at the Business News Desk in New York and see how Wall Street finished the week. Myron? Myron, thank you. Mortgage rates are going down, and so are some of the other costs of getting a mortgage, such as points. CNN's personal finance correspondent Paula Nelson reports in today's edition of Your Money. All right, Jim, thank you. As CNN first reported today, Pentagon sources have confirmed to CNN that Oliver North plans to retire from the Marine Corps on his eligibility date of May 1st. The sources say North is expected to ask for an extended leave of absence until that date. Earlier, the Washington Post reported North gave an employee of Texas billionaire H. Ross Perot a letter granting him presidential authority to deliver $100,000 in a failed plan to free a U.S. hostage in January of 1986. The Post said the money was from Perot, and it wound up being squandered on high living by a Canadian who was supposed to help win the release of hostage Peter Kilburn, but didn't. Kilburn, a librarian at the American University in Beirut, was kidnapped in 1984 and killed in 1986 by a Libyan terrorist group in apparent retaliation for the U.S. bombing of Libya. Illegal aliens will be given some leeway in seeking amnesty in the U.S. Under the 1986 Immigration Reform Act, aliens can be granted amnesty if they prove they've lived here since January 1st of 1982. The government said today aliens who file by May 4th will get an additional 60 days to file documents to support their applications.
The United States program, as compared to other nations that have tried this, has been unusually successful. In processing all of these applicants, not one person has been deported, and we have not heard of even one incident which would involve a breach of confidentiality. I urge all who may be eligible, therefore, to come forward and apply for this once-in-a-lifetime chance.
The new amnesty program has attracted only about half of the 2 million applications the Immigration and Naturalization Service thought it would get.
Now, back to Newsday on CNN.
The sunny island of Barbados in the Caribbean has been the focus of our travel guide reports this week. Today, we end our series on Barbados with a look at what the shopping is like in the tropical paradise. Most of the good shopping in Barbados is on the west coast, in and around Bridgetown. Here and at the resort gift shops, the tourist goes looking for vacation souvenirs.
I'm surprised that the sale areas or purchasing areas in this island are in big department stores, just like Macy's or something back home.
Don't expect to find quaint little shops or marketplaces. The best merchandise is either in the heart of Bridgetown or in the hotel shopping arcades, like this one at the Hilton. Dinnerware is among the popular duty-free items. So are the big-name watches.
$15 American.
Do you ever come down on your prices at all?
Yeah, man, I do bargains, man. I bargain.
Just a little bit, huh?
Many people say it's more fun haggling with the beach vendors than browsing through a department store, and it is a pleasure to buy a trinket or two just for the experience.
Okay, now these you said were 15 apiece, so that would be a total of 30, but you brought it down to 12 apiece, so that'd be a total of 24. 24. But since I'm buying two,
I give you for 22.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Most prices, though, are not negotiable. And keep in mind that Barbados is not cheap to begin with. Hotels and food especially can be on the steep side. But the island is beautiful, and tourists keep coming back for the beaches, the scenery, and the fascinating history.
When I come back here on a visit, I find that people are always saying hello, glad to see me again. They'll do as people do, walk across the street to say hello and how are you and how's your wife and all of that sort of thing.
Bella Shaw, CNN Travel Guide.